Hello everyone, welcome to the Fundamentals of Piano Playing, a two-part video where I share the culmination of my studies of the instrument. Inside, you'll find pretty much everything you need to know about piano playing that has been handed down by my mentor, Professor Zita Zohar, and her long lineage of piano pedagogues around the world through my very own lens of experiences. My hope is to be able to promote a deeper understanding of music making and help enrich piano lovers of all age and experiences despite of the school of teaching that you came from. My name is Frédéric. I'm very excited to have you here, and without further ado, let's dive into it. Take a moment to feel the keyboard with the surfaces of your finger. How does it feel? Let the fingers lie flat and just rest there, doing nothing. Don't activate anything, don't try to push anything, and the keys may go down a little bit, as you can see by the weight of my hands, and that's okay, but I don't want you to kind of do this activate. And this is, see, I'm activating this. If I take my hand off of the key, it will still look like this because it's activated, it's tense. So it may look like I'm here, but not with the weight of my arm. You see the difference? I'm engaging and not. This is going to be your reference. This is how it feels to be in contact with the instrument. If I just go out this way, this is already suspending me in air. I can't access gravity this way. Keeping my elbow close to me works as a counterweight. This is really not ideal for moving because you're always going to end up having to activate. My teacher will describe this in the image of T-Rex. Yes, the dinosaur T-Rex, with their tiny little arm clamped to their sides. Posture is your other point of access to your very best friend, gravity. Your tailbone holds the same importance as your elbows to allow your upper body to move freely without inhibitions. This may make it easier. Don't clench. You're not riding a horse. To describe it in the most general way, they flick the keys from the knuckles. They move from the knuckle joints and it goes like this. This is what they look like. A good sound happens when your finger is straight in relation to the keys. So essentially on every note, you're always playing straight. You finish the flicking movement and then you travel. You see, I'm putting my left hand here to train myself not to go out with the elbows. But that's what it's doing. It's flicking, move, flicking, move, flicking, and then you move, flick and 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 move. So the hand always comes back to a neutral position. That's just the first part. The second part of producing a good sound is the release after. As I told you before, every movement finishes, right? So after the sound happened, you can't really do anything else to the sound. It already happened. What you could do if you want to do anything to the sound is actually release the weight. Press, yeah, I still have my weight here. And I finish my flick and get off it. But I can still be here. I don't have to completely let go of this key. I could still be there without pressing. But if I think of just returning the flick, it will release on its own. To me, the fingers have two functions. It is your point of contact with the keyboard that produces the sound. It is also like a tire. It moves your palm. This is your vehicle, and this is your tires. It's sort of like how a spider moves. The palm is its body and the fingers are the legs. If you move the palm first, it's a bigger unit, and so it's much harder to control, and that's how you make a good sound. Now that you understand how your fingers produce the sound, let's take a closer look on how they move. As I mentioned before, your palm does not move your fingers. It's the other way around. It's the finger that transports the palm. One important thing that you have to remember is that you're always playing the key straight to produce a good sound and moving the weight only after that the sound has been successfully produced. And this applies to every tempo, no matter how fast. This is what I mean by the finger transporting the palm. This palm, yeah? It's not. What it does is just after you flick, see, you move. My weight is ready to do A flat, and after I flick A flat, see, it moves the palm to do. So I can do this in. You have to have this movement, but it's. This is an exaggeration, yeah? It's a very small click, but this happens. And so I can do that straight to travel here, transport the palm there. Okay, let me try to do this. It's super tricky to do it this slow, but I hope you can see. When you don't finish the movement is when you generally get stuck at the bottom of the piano. You don't really need to go to the bottom of the key bed to produce a sound. And so, you see, if you don't finish the movement and if you have your weight here, to go over here you have to activate because you're still pretty much stuck here. So there's no other way but activating this second finger to make a sound. And so that's why your sound is uncontrollable sometimes because you don't know what you're just pretty much throwing darts in the dark if you do it that way. But if you feel the movement of the weight, you feel how the finger transport the palm. If you don't finish the movement, if you just go down to the bottom of the key bed and use the piano to move, you're literally, you're treating the piano like your finger like a vault pole and the piano like the high jumper bed, because you're always jumping. You have to, I cannot move easily if I do, and I don't really need to do this. First there's the pedal, and even if I want to kind of somehow feel a physical connection, see, I can be here and then have my weight ready and available for that one. Instead of... I'm gonna try to see if I can do this, yeah, but I don't know if I can move by the palm anymore. It's a poor demonstration, but you get the point, is that if you move the bigger unit, then you're going to naturally miss notes. You're going to land and you're going to not have any control to the sound that you're producing because it is not deliberate. So the reason why you're struggling to play effortlessly usually is because you're never on the keys. Like every time you touch the key, you propel yourself out. And so the next movement has to be another restart. Whereas if you travel the way that I just showed, you don't really have to get out of the keyboard. This is your instrument. The keyboard is not a hotbed that is going to burn your fingers. This is your friend, and this is going to help you produce beautiful sound if you don't jump out of them like crazy. One thing that may sound counterintuitive for you is that the more notes that you have to play, the more grounded that you have to be. I can't move too much. That's not the intention. I'm not trying to do a theatrics of hands on the ivories, but the intention is to make the correct sound, and you really don't need a lot of movement. Everything that comes out has to come down, and the same goes for everything that comes down must come up. So the distance of how much you go down is the same distance that you're gonna have to come up. You may come from the school of thought that says round your hands and round your knuckles. That doesn't have any premise if you're not in touch with the keyboard itself. A lot of the time what it's going to do is, if you put a stance on a children's hand, a kid's hand, it's gonna make them dissociate with the keys. They don't know, they just know how to make a stance, but not connecting with the instrument. If you have a hard time believing me on this, go check out Rodin's bronze sculptures of the pianist's hands. It will show that the palm of the hand moves parallel to the keyboard when the fingers flick. It's a really important concept. As long as you understand that it moves this way and the fingers move the palm, you'll be in good shape. Now that you know that there's not so much up and down movement in piano playing, let's take a look and examine the part of your body that acts as an anchor and ensures unrestrained access to gravity that will get you the optimal outcome without working much: your elbows. Now, think of your skeleton as a crane. Your pelvis is the one that grounds you to the chair, and your spinal column is a tower that holds your skull at the apex, your shoulder blade and collarbone, which hold your arms, and your arms are like the forklift. Your upper arm and your forearm they're very long, but they're also connected with this other joint, which is your elbows. And the only thing that you have to remember is that if this forklift is actually mining sound, this is the structure, the mechanical structure, your spinal column, your crane that holds the two of the towers, and this four important joints, right? The shoulders, elbows, wrist, and knuckles. The only thing that you have to remember, the general difference between your forearm and your upper arm is that this hinge moves you this way. It moves you front and back. It does not move that way. Because the arm is long, the elbow actually acts as a counterweight that allows the forearm to have a much broader range of motion. Now, it doesn't go this way, it goes this way. Because you have your forklifts here, and this is the whole mechanism in which you block the sound. And the wrist is just there to let things happen. It absorbs the movement, but it never really initiates a movement. So this goes in and out, the wrist just stays there, and this plucks. Okay, and T-Rex may be a hard one to imagine because of their small, tiny arms in comparison to their body. Velociraptor is more like it. You can also think about your elbows growing out from the middle of your breast sternum, your breastbones. You resist the temptation of like doing that. I get all kinds of like weird sound, but you really don't need to do that. And then maybe if you're learning something at the beginning of anything, then yes, you introduce the movement, that there is this but then you refine it, so it doesn't need to be all these things. Like, there are complex movement that are happening, right? There's this thing, and then there's this flexibility, and this just, it's like a shock absorber, like a Dyson ball on a vacuum cleaner. It's never really active on its own. But this is never to be used as a wingspan. It's not productive for you to do that, because what you're doing is that if I'm playing from here, I'm pretty much having to activate everything, and I never rely on the feedback of the piano. No matter how fast of a run or a piece that you are playing, your arms should never be tired. If you're tired, it is inhibited somewhere, then you're not completely free. You're not shifting your weight effectively by moving efficiently. You're just pretty much using brute force to move. Let's go back to our crane. Since we are working with gravity, these counterweights, our shoulders, elbows, and pelvis, need to do their job as counterweights so that we have access to gravity, not fighting it. Once they are out of track, either our hips is up and we are stranded somewhere there, or our shoulders is up here and our elbows is out there, you're totally out of luck. So these are all the mechanism that guides you how to move and glide around the surface of the key. Finishing one note and then traveling to the next one. It's not, I'm not going up and down, I'm just flicking and then I'm moving. You always want to have your palm wide and neutral, so you're always coming back from that flick into a neutral position. For example, this Schubert Impromptu G flat major, if I don't be able to play like You know what, guys? It's really one thing that I found that's really hard is that giving a bad example, because it's when you're really actually practicing well in the practice room and you understood not just intellectually but your physical being also understood what the assignment is all about. You forgot to do it poorly. I'm having troubles actually giving you bad examples because now I understand what needs to happen timing wise. But that can also be a good barometer of how well you practice. It's sort of like once your body is programmed to know what is it that you wanted to get, it forgets all the other ways that it was doing it before, and no matter how much you try to kind of like F it up, it's there. The way you sit will heavily influence the sound you produce. If the crane does not have a stable ground in which it sits upon, its ability to pluck good sound will be compromised. Your pelvis is the counterweight so that your upper body is free to do this 360 movement. Your main objective is to keep the relationship with the keyboard no matter how you go, like the velociraptor. Remember, that's one of the ways of thinking about it, that your elbows are sticking from the side of your torso, so it moves like that. It can move up front and back, right and left, and it pretty much have this whole rotation. To sit dynamically takes a lot of awareness. The first tendency is to do this thing. But if you're even paying attention right now, this is compromising my sound. It's so much different when I'm here. Because I have much more room and I'm not, this is one, I don't have any room in front of my torso to move anywhere or to have any kind of like freedom of movement, and I'm not fully sitting, I'm really hovering. And you know, there's a complex network of muscles over here that got engaged and disengaged as you dynamically move around when you're sitting. When you're slumping like this, it sits differently, it feels differently over here. And when you're hovering, you are pretty much cutting gravity from where you need the most, at the tips of your fingers, because those are the ones that are producing sound. I like these piano chairs with back to practice because you can train yourself to sit well and then put my back against the chair so I know that I am actually not doing this, because this is what it's going to do. It's actually going to cramp your style and you won't be able to play well or produce any good sounds if you're doing that. I want to discuss about the point of sound. You really don't need to go to the bottom to produce a good sound. See, I'm going like about that much down. There's the point of sound. See? Again. Really, you don't need to go down there. You really, that's all you need to make the point. See, and how fast and how slow I go into the keys determine my dynamic. Different pianos, of course, are going to have different points of sound and sensitivity. But you know, knowing and comprehending this can be a lifesaver. The distance that you go down is the same distance that you have to travel up. And so why some people said like, why can I play fast? I can easily answer, it's because you're digging into it too much. How am I gonna play fast with that? In order for me to be able to move, I need to return, see that flick, and I need to return to a neutral position. It is each and every time. Number one, creating an awareness and a relationship with your instrument is very, very crucial. You need to know your instrument in order for you to determine how to move and actually how to use it properly. Number two, you need to know yourself in terms of where are you sitting? What kind of relationship that you have with your instrument? You're just moving from one point of sound to another point of sound. Little by little, the silences become. But it is still landed one by one, and I am flicking to move myself around, to support myself for a maximum sound production on the next location. That's why timing is so important, because everything is about timing. When you enter, when you leave, when you go to the next note, how long you're going to be staying there. Let me remind you once again that our domain is sound. Sure, we produce the sound by moving, but gestures are not our medium of expression. Leave that for the dancers. The objective of moving for us is transportation to get to the next note. The piano key is a lever. When activated, it goes down and swing the hammer up to meet the strings. This lever can be activated by this movement. And that's it. You don't really have to flail around in order to make sound. This is the movement that you need. That's it. If you go wildly across the keyboard, all this does is it throws you off of the keyboard, and that's a recipe for disaster. The relationship between the hands and the keyboard is a horizontal one. I really like to think of the palm like a printer cartridge that moves a parallel to the paper, the keyboard in this case, to print sound. And like a printer cartridge, it makes stops on every single dot. But this palm travels horizontally across the keyboard. You don't need to do. See, I'm not even landing on notes when I'm actually doing that, because like every note has to be landed. And you have to finish each of this flick. When you go up and down like this, you are always activating when you're doing. It's not efficient and also unnecessary. Virtuosos understand this principle. I truly think that if you put in the effort to understand the principle of movement and sound producing, virtuosity is attainable. Artistry is a completely different subject, but it really doesn't take a genius to play fast when you truly grasp this principle. I used to also make the naive assumption that if I want something to sound round and continuous, I will make this circular motion across the keyboard. But actually, you really don't need to. It's an illusion that you're creating that the sound sounds round, and you could do that by prolonging one of the notes. In this case, the C sharp. So you don't need to make this U curve. Actually, if you continuous sound. It's very pedestrian if you do it. Because it groups it in 3. If you wanted to have a continuous sound like an infinity loop, you have to turn the other U around. So you're not making U curves like that, but you're making a wave curve that goes. So it's not. Organic sound uses the momentum of the end of the group of the notes to start the next one, to create a continuous cycle. It's ebb and flowing like the waves, so it is not this scalloping pattern, but you have to turn one onto its head. When you really truly listen to the opening of the note, like remember we talked about how if you don't press after the sound happen and you let it rise, the hammer will drop and hence create this effect of opening of the sound. There is a feedback that you could feel, the resistance from the key. And as you go up, you already kind of put your palm into the trajectory of like where it's moving next. So as soon as the sound happened, there's no need to press anymore. I'm just staying here and I'm completing my flick so that I can go to. Piano playing is much like pointillism. You create lines and thus shapes from many points of sound. What is being connected is the sound and not necessarily the movement. We move to facilitate the production of the right succession of sound instead of moving in an attempt to shape the sound. So you don't want to do. Has to be landed. It is fundamental to understand that there are silences in between the points of sound. This is what Debussy, Mozart talks about. And these silences are what defines a character, carries the emotional charge, caress, or do anything in your imagination. But most importantly, without these silences, nothing is ever authentic. Without the freedom that the silence allow, you are coming to the next note from a compromised position. As you progress towards mastery and the more attuned you get to this principle of practice, the more the movement will refine and eventually vanish from what most people can visually see. I am not shaping it in way moving. It creates some shape, but it creates some shapes by how much my weight falls into each group of notes. And that's really not what I want to do. In this thing, I really want to see how I'm traveling with my outer fingers from one to the next. For example, how does that feel for it to do? And to finish each and every flick. And essentially, the silence becomes closer and closer as I get faster and faster. I'm not moving any different. But each and every time, after I execute a note, I go to the next one and just be neutral there. And what becomes smaller and smaller is just the silence, and it may look like I'm playing it, I'm trying to physically connect, but no, this is still. If I rely on the piano to move, if I plant my pinky here and I have to gauge it so that my third finger needs to know, that means I'm using the piano to move, and that's not the idea of completing each flick. That's why a lot of the things you could just play with 1 2 1 2 1 2, because you could just do, if you understand this principle. I think every pianist, whether it's hobby or vocational, who falls in love with the instrument should at least try to play its predecessor, the harpsichord, at least once. And then you kind of understand what's the grandfather of the piano does. The main difference is that the harpsichord plucks the string, whereas the piano, we have this felt hammer that strikes the string. Therefore, the piano has more control and range of dynamics and colors. It can sustain longer. But you will know, especially if you are one that has been laboring on the piano, you'll understand that on a harpsichord, you're not going to be able to do that. First of all, the harpsichord is much shallower than the piano, and once the sound happens, you can't really do anything. And therefore, plunking yourself to the bottom of the key bed there is gonna get you stuck, because you're not going to be able to move. It's a pretty weird sensation, because when I tried it at the first time, it really did give me a lot of information of what piano playing is, because really you cannot be bestial on a harpsichord. The most thing that it taught me also is that if you let go, we have the pedal. If you let go, the resonance of a note is much more honest, beautiful, and communicates much more to the audience than if you hammer it out. Miles Davis once said that timing isn't the main thing, it's the only thing. I truly believe that attuned musicians are time benders. Essentially, every aspect of piano playing can be broken down to timing. How you enter the keys, how you move from one note to another, how you release the key. Dynamics are all about timing your entry into the keys. Differences in expressions are a matter of timing. Dramatic pauses, unexpected harmonic changes, modulation. Really, everything about music making is synonymous with timing. So how do you apply this wisdom? Suppose we take a note, this E. The speed in which I enter the key will produce a different sound. That's a slow one. Or that's it. If I struck the pedal, so the speed in which I enter the key defines the sound. The slower I go into the key, the softer the sound I get. The faster I go into the key, the bigger the sound I got. This is how you can have gradations of dynamics and intensities of the sound, by timing your entrance. Let's take Buddha's teaching that the present is ever so fleeting and it's constantly moving, but the past is done. After you sound a note, nothing can happen, but you have to already let go. After the note happened, you're already traveling into the future. That has not happened yet, but you have your weight there now. I'm not moving, but I'm disengaging. And so I can time my entrance to the key. For example, in Ravel's Sonatine, if you do, that's gross, right? So it has a different quality, and this requires different touch and different timing and different entrances to the key. I never really go fully inside. That's going fully down, that's going there. Let's do an example with verbal speech. Thank you. Thank you. It sounds different to you, right? It conveys different meaning. You know which one is sincere, you know which one is not sincere. It's all in the timing, how much you spend time on a note, when you leave it, and then using momentum to go into the other note. That's all timing. We talked about producing a good sound, that this is the movement and it carries the palm. Yeah, no violent movement. No need to do that, because again, your goal and objective is to refine the movement as you go along. I'm staying in contact and gliding through the keys pretty much, and that's how I time it, so that I don't have to do, and then I'll never get fast if I do that. I'm gonna try to illustrate to you what using the finger like a pole vault does. If you hear and then you're going here, that means if you still have your pressure here, this is going to be, it's a compromise. I'm not fully there because I'm still here, even though it doesn't sound anymore, and then it becomes sticky. When you do that, you're not free to move. You're actually measuring the distance with your finger, and you really do not need to do that. The key is to travel horizontally with your palm and to keep finishing this lick. I'm going to demonstrate again what happens when you release the note. This is the lever system, and so if I keep pressing on this, the hammer does not go down. But if the sooner I release, there is more room for the hammer, for the string to vibrate, because the hammer goes down a little bit. There's like a little bit, a sort of a bellow. And if you don't, you get this choke sound. Yeah. Now I'm going to demonstrate one more thing. I don't want you to feel like disengaging means taking yourself away from the piano. That's not what I meant. You can disengage and still be here. I'm free to move. Pressing it, the only way that you can move doing this is by moving your elbow. I won't stress enough that the best sound is produced when the relationship between the finger and the keyboard is straight, not sideways, but straight. The movements, those happens in between the travels and not using the piano to turn, not using the piano to do that, but flicking. The movement, it usually makes you feel very, very anxious because you're really not in control of what you're doing in the surface of the piano. It's more of a slither, and you do not go up and down like that. That's definitely not the correct idea of piano playing. You don't need to move a lot, you need to move cleverly, you need to move efficiently. Everything happens in between the note. A little goes very long way here in piano playing. Where can you make this sound without having to do, without imposing on the instrument? What does it feel to just kind of like jiggle and be there? It is really important for you to understand and your body to understand that you do not need to do a heck of a lot. Figure out how to be neutral. What does it feel to be neutral on each and every note? This is how I feel to be neutral on my second finger. This is what goes on my fourth finger. And yes, I'm playing them staccato because playing piano is pointillism. It's really, you're connecting the dots so that it looks like a line, and what diminishes over time is the silences in between the notes. You have to figure out the trajectory of your movement. The idea is that timing is different for everybody, and I know the timing is difficult, but I kid you not, and I promise that you will find great use of this. Grouping is one of the most important things to do to make your life easier. Any hand will seize upon the idea of playing a 40-note sweep, but you could play 2 notes 20 times. If the notes are letters in an alphabet, a combination of them becomes a syllable. Now, syllable can form words, and then words, sentences, paragraph, and so on. But you need to know and be able to identify the syllable first before you expand out. Effectively speaking, there are 20 pairs of notes in a 40-note sweep. So you could do that pretty easily if you keep the idea that you're just traveling 2 notes at a time. Break it down to the smallest unit. It's very easy to do 2 notes. Or you do, I like this one better. One is active and one is passive. One happens because of the momentum of the other. They're not equal, they are action and reaction. Three can also sometimes form a syllable, but three, it's a little crowded and it's a little bit more complex for the arms and the hands to do. If it comes back to the original note, it's much easier. So in this case you have, so there's two, but there's also three within the two. If it comes back to the original note, all you have to do is move somewhere, usually inside or outside, but move to a different location. Let's go back to the threesome. If you do, it's never go. If you do this, then it goes back into a same volume, and then you sound like you're milking a cow. Not only the second one that I come back to is not as loud, it's in a different position, it's also shorter. With this figuration, what I'm trying to show you is that you keep moving. Never crossing the river twice. As I go faster, it's just the silences becomes closer and closer together, but I still am moving like that. Minimize. Until this just goes like that. This goes like this. Those little components has to be, the little grouping has to be there first. Otherwise, if you're doing, you're activating all the time and you're working so unnecessarily hard and not producing a good sound. In a trill, for example, it's a series of two notes, right? Ta-da, ta-da, da-da, ta-da, ta-da. And then you have to organize to make sense to each other's movement, so it sounds continuous instead of. Remember the. So I can find the threes. After I find the twos, right? So and then I have this combination. I also have this combination, and so that can be I can group it like that, but I could also group it as long as I get moving, no matter how in minimum increments, I'm sure to produce a fresh sound. But you have to also rely on the feedback of the keyboard, because that's going to tell you how much to move and where. This is really the right representation of these ménages that the group of notes can have. Because I could do, this is the original grouping. Right? And then I can also have, there's also a momentum. So that's a different thing. That's two completely different things. And so if I combine the two, I have to have a common denominator where the two connects, right? In which case this is the second G. So this, I found out that I actually don't have to violently go there. I could just do that and stay on the plane. If I go in on the second G, I can just do that. Most pitfalls would look like this. Because if you dig yourself that deep here, you can't go, it's hard to go back out. It's the greatest thing about grouping is that it frees up your hand when it thinks about it's only thinking about moving 2 or 3 notes at a time. You have to think about the smaller units. Again, it's the smaller units that move your bigger units and not vice versa. If grouping is the organization of movements, shaping is mapping the trajectory of the movements across the keyboard. How you're going to travel with your palm and what you're going to express. Shaping is this process of combining grouping with timing to make something flat into 3D. A master writer can transport you into a realm so vivid and personal with the craft of his penmanship. We do this with sound. Only the words and sentences have been laid out to us by the composer. Our aim is to re-experience what the composer heard in his vision and bring it to life. The best way to start is to group your sound syllables into larger umbrellas of movement. So you have right? So those groups of 2, you want to group into larger umbrellas of movement. So you could do, or you could do, or you could do, you look into the hills and valleys of the distances between the succession of notes. Remember that we wanted to try to level the playing field, right? So you go from here is down. Now where am I going? Okay, am I playing 3rd finger or 4th finger on note A in the white keys? Okay, let's just see. My 3rd finger is already there. And so if this is played down, I played this up. So it's a closer distance. And then from here, I need to bring this here. But if I go down here, see what just happened? If I go down and sync, then I have to activate it. But if I don't, all those you figure out. I'm gonna illustrate this with a happy birthday. A lot of people do it. So that's or you could do. Who here feels a bit challenged when implementing specific instructions from lessons or master classes? Don't worry. There are questions that you can ask yourself that will help this process of assimilating the knowledge. It certainly helps me, and I hope it will for you too. As we know, playing the piano is a complex activity. You really need acute awareness, and there are usually more than 2 faculties working at any given time. The problem with words is that it's limited in what it can describe. Words are personal. One word can mean one thing for you. I can take it another way around. A sentence can really mean something entirely different for each of us. Because we are making and playing with sound, the most reliable metric is the sound that we produce. Is it the right sound? Does it sound the way that you imagine the composer intended it when he wrote it? Is it the correct color? Is it the right tone? What about the balance between voices? What are you trying to convey? Is it the right character? Is it the correct length? Does it make sense? These are all the things that you have to ask yourself, especially at the beginning stages when you're learning a piece. Figuring out how you want things to sound will help you lead to your musical blueprint. Instructions like go up, come out, go in can be very confusing. In reality, there will always be a combination of movements going on at the same time. So it's always good to filter through these instructions by asking, is it direction or is it location? This can mean come out, a movement towards yourself, coming. But this can also mean come out, but I'm flicking in. See? Direction or location. I'll show you again. This is, I'm making sound by going inside. Right? I'm moving inside. I'm still flicking. I'm still doing that, but I'm moving my palm inside. Sometimes it also means 2 different things done consecutively. So for example, if you be inside but play towards myself. So I'm in here, but I'm playing towards myself. But I'm in here. What will help you make this decision is that where you're going to have to move after that. If somebody told you to go out after the thumb, then you go out. But then where do you have to come after this? After you go out, you may have to go in. No matter what it is, you need to remember that it is not up and down. It's not this. It's not up and down from your elbow. Playing the piano, it's much more of an in and out experience with the finger flicking. It's not a place for jerky movement. It's not a place for flourishes. There's no flourishes in the wrist. You're not a dancer. You're not trying to express something with your flourishes of the wrist. You're trying to express with the sound that you produce, with the sound that you make. You can almost probably say that everything is about timing. And it's even more so in piano playing. For example, let's just say you're playing a D flat major scale. The entrance to the key is one timing. The entrance of the timing you leave the key is another timing. How are you going to time this next note coming after? Okay, I'm doing it very slow because I'm talking in between, so it's a little hard. But what's the time to go from one note to the next one? What momentum are you taking from the previous movement? So you're not, it's not. That's raping the piano, that's not playing the piano. Those are all 16th note. Yeah, if I play it like that, you'll be bored to death, of course. See, not all 16th notes are equal. So those are all a matter of timing. Let's break it down, yeah? So I have more time here. So essentially, there are an orchestra here divided between my 10 fingers. And I have to, the outer line is my melody, and this is my harmonic figure. You just need to get from one note to the next one with the minimum effort and amount of movement. This is another important example for timing. I'm still pressing. And when I do this, the hammer does not go down. It's a lever system, yeah? This is a lever system. And so you hear that if you release your weight after, the hammer goes down just a tidbit, and then it gives the string more room to vibrate. So when Schumann is talking about a crescendo on the same chord on the piano, I think that's what he meant. Alive instrument, but you animated, you made it alive, but it's not going to dance with you if you do not have the sensitivity and the awareness to dance with it. If you're only doing. A lot of piano playing is measuring the feedback that you got and deciding what to do afterwards. With this in mind, everything, how deep, how fast you go in, the releases, how you're going to get to the next note, which momentum you're going to use, are all the roadmaps that you can use in order to produce the blueprints of your music. Without the sensibility of timing, we're just making random sounds. The name of the game is to level the movement field. A single millimeter on the keyboard is a huge distance. The white, now if you see this, the white and the black keys are laid out on different heights. They're not on the same level. Because of this, naturally, they should be approached differently. And what we want to do is we want to level the playing field. Black keys are to be played down. White keys are played up. So you not you need to figure out several things to construct the succession of a movement. 1. What part of the body initiate the movement? 2. In which direction? 3. What kind of movement? In other words, how do I get from point A to point B in the most non-disruptive way? Though it may not look like I'm moving much, there's a lot of micro movements that I have implemented and my body knows what to do with it. For example, to break down this, that's a breakdown. that's the grouping of the notes. So there's 3 movements there. Be-dum, ba-yum, ba-da-dum. Yeah, and I have to weave them together, but my hands know that that's one. So one passive, active, passive, active, passive, passive. Now I have to make it disappear, and you don't see the seam by making the movement small. If I do, that's a bigger movement, yeah, and I want to minimize it. And I make it even smaller, yes. And I make it now, the seams disappear, yes. If you can train your ear to hear the emotions and the intonations, the different meanings of articulations, the suggestions in mannerism, and indications and placements of stresses, you're in a pretty good place to make music. I had originally intended the previous title screen to look like this. I regretted it in an instant and changed it back into this, which I think is more effective. And admit it, you heard it in 2 different ways. This is your inner listening, the most overlooked branch of functionality when it comes to piano playing. An ever-knowing source that we all can and have the capabilities to tap into. It's just that maybe somewhere along the way in our progression of life, we decided that this does not apply in our lives. Plus, our attempt to verbalize it back then fall short. To be able to conceive it is one thing, but to put it into words is another very challenging thing. Suppose you have a series of 5 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. Yeah? Independent of one another, they sound like this. Yeah, all agree. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. Without context. The only context that they have is pitch. Now, if I modify their relationship to each other, I can have variations like this. Or you get my point. They all suggest and mean different things. They're no longer just do, re, mi, fa, sol. Now, the inner listening identifies this composition, the relationship of these notes, and how they present the sound. So intonation is one of it. Place and manner of articulation, like any language, give different meanings to the same word. Or in this case, melody. So that's why is different than. And then we haven't put another variant there, which is rhythm. So that also means something different. 4/16th note is just 4/16th note before you chisel it, before you give it a shape. You are chiseling the sound to give shape and meaning into it. And this is what your inner listening is best for. If you do not have this vision, you're just learning to move. You're not expressing anything. Alright, I'm going to play the most butchered piece of piano music as a demonstration. This infamous Frédéric is a strain of 2 repeated notes, E and D sharp. It's a minor second relationship. If I just play it, then we all die and burn in hell. This very intimate interval, it's very nuanced. It can hold so much tension like the jaws. But if you open mouth it like this, for example, that's a gross misunderstanding. That's für Eric. It's not für Elise. The best way to work it out is to sing it. You wouldn't sing it right now. Which note is more important, E or D sharp? Which gives the tension? Which feels like more of a release to you, and which feels more of like a tension to you? To me, it's this one, right? So because if I held this, you hear that? Okay, so with that information, I know that my D sharp should be longer than my E. Okay, let's figure out now. If it's only E and D sharp repeating, there should be a relationship between the two notes, right? One is active, one is passive. But I get my timing of when I come in from being on the. Now, how many do I have? Now, how can I shape that and hear it so it doesn't become bayam? I'm not just repeating the movement of the first one that I've identified. The key is to keep moving, right? Remember that your hand moves like a spider and your finger move your palm. See, I'm constantly moving inside with my palm. And if you notice, I changed my fingering as well. You could do that, because you will be in a different place. Then you could do the same fingering. Keep moving, and that puts it in a bigger umbrella. And then, oh, how many more notes do I have? I have the front E. Then you have a shape release. In a nutshell, this is what practicing is all about. It's really not repeating ad verbatim until you are deaf and dumb. Repeating until you could do it automatically is really misguided. You want the automation in expression, not in the muscle acrobatics. So it is not you move to produce sound to be able to express. The sound will mimic your movement. So if you have a spastic movement, that's what's gonna come out. If you think that this is some sort of athletics of pressing keys, sadly, that's what you're going to get, a mechanical sound. We're not whack-a-moling here, and though it may look like a physically demanding activity, music making is actually much more cerebral. It is more vision manifesting than throwing darts in the dark. Thank you so much for staying till the end and watching. If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to subscribe and watch all the other contents in this channel. Also check us out in Instagram with the handle Joy of Practicing. I will see you next time.